The NuPhy Air75 V3 is here, and it promises to take what made version 1 and 2 great and refine it into the best low-profile mechanical keyboard on the market. Let's see if they did it. Before we dive in, I want to mention that NuPhy sent me the Air75 V3 for the purpose of reviewing it. I was not paid to make this video, and NuPhy has no input on my review. I do have an affiliate link in the description for you if you're interested in picking up the Air75 V3 and you'd like to support this channel. Even though the original Air75 is only about 4 years old or so, we're already on version 3. It seems to me that each time NuPhy has been trying to add some features to satisfy keyboard enthusiasts, like myself, while also retaining the broad appeal to general users who care more about things like connectivity and battery life. So is version 3 the right balance of advanced features, general usability, and typing feel? Let's run through the features and specs, then we'll do a couple of sound tests, and then we'll talk about the pros and cons. The Air75 V3 is a 75% keyboard with 84 keys and an optional knob module, and it will be available in both ANSI and ISO layouts. The construction is aluminum for the case top and ABS plastic for the case bottom. There are 2 color options available, silver with white keycaps and all black. The dimensions are 319 by 129 millimeters with a front height of about 14 millimeters and a rear height of 23.5 millimeters without the keycaps. The weight is 724 grams or 1.6 pounds. There are 2 position fold-out feet for a total of 3 typing angles. In the flat position, the rubber feet allow the Air75 V3 to sit on top of a laptop keyboard. Connectivity includes 3 Bluetooth connections with 125 Hz polling, 2.4 GHz with 1000 Hz polling, and USB-C wired also with 1000 Hz polling. There is a storage slot for the 2.4 GHz receiver on the back of the keyboard near the USB-C port. The PCB is hot swappable and compatible with Gateron low-profile 3.0 switches and also regular high-profile switches, as the pin positions are the same. However, high-profile switches will not seat in the plate properly due to the low-profile configuration, so they won't stay in securely. The switch options include red linear, brown tactile, and silent linear options. The plate is polycarbonate and the stabilizers are plate-mounted and pre-lubricated. There are several layers of foam, including a switch pad, foam between the PCB and plate, and foam under the PCB in the case bottom. The PCB assembly uses a gasket mount. The keycaps are double-shot PBT in NuPhy's NSA profile and are color-matched to the case color. The top right corner of the Air75 V3 features a 3-way option that can be a traditional key, a low-profile knob, or a tall knob. The module is swapped by removing a single screw, and both low-profile and high-profile knobs will be included in pre-orders. The backlighting is full north-facing RGB with built-in modes that can be controlled in NuPhy IO software, and 2 side accent lights that have ambient modes and indicator features. The battery capacity is 4000 mAh, and NuPhy claims a battery life of up to 1200 hours with all the lights turned off, or 60 to 100 hours with the lighting turned on depending on the brightness level. The Air75 V3 uses NuPhy IO for customization, including remapping multiple layers, creating macros, and updating the functions of the knob or key module. The price of the Air75 V3 is $139 US. There are some add-ons that will increase the total cost, including a wrist rest, a new folio case, and additional keycap and switch sets. Starting off the pros, let's talk about the build quality. We still have an aluminum top frame and a plastic bottom, but it does give off slightly more premium vibes than the V1 and V2. This silver color option, which is the white color option with the white keycaps and the silver frame, it has more of that natural aluminum finish rather than like a coating style finish. And I think that's part of why at least this color option looks more premium. The metal feels good. It doesn't seem too thin or flimsy. In the plastic bottom, it still features 2-position fold-out feet, which is nice. And it's also not a super cheap feeling plastic. The colors and overall design, of course, is going to be subjective as to whether you like it. But the build quality is very good, which I would expect for the price range. Now let's talk about the wireless connectivity, which is another pro here. I've been testing both the Bluetooth and the 2.4 gigahertz connections, and they have both been stable for me. Now in the past, I have had a couple issues with the 2.4 gigahertz connection on the Air75 V2, as well as the Halo V2 series keyboards, but so far, so good with the Air75 V3. And the same goes for Bluetooth. It's been working fine with both my MacBook and my iPad. Now we also now have something I've wanted since the first Air75, and that is a little storage slot for the 2.4 gigahertz receiver on the back of the keyboard. I've always thought this was important for a portable keyboard so you don't lose the receiver while you're traveling, and it's great to see that they finally integrated that into the keyboard. One of the biggest pros of the Air75 V3 is the competition-destroying 1200-hour battery life. Now, some context here is necessary. When I say that it destroys the competition, I'm talking specifically about mechanical low-profile keyboards, not all low-profile keyboards. When it comes to low-profile mechanical keyboards, there really are not that many options on the market that achieve a battery life greater than about 300-ish hours, so the Air75 V3 is in a league of its own now. Of course, we do have to acknowledge the 1200 hours of use time between charges is with all of the lighting turned off, but even when you use the lighting, your use time will be 60 to 100 hours depending on the brightness level you have, which that's also pretty good. NuPhy achieved this by stepping away from QMK-based firmware, which is, as I said, not very power efficient, and they developed their own firmware, which they call NuPhy IO. And that is why customization is now done through the NuPhy IO web app rather than VIA. Speaking of NuPhy IO, another pro is the extensive customization that you can do. It's a simple to use UI that works in a web browser, so there is no software to install and no worries about compatibility with your operating system. In the software, you have access to fully remap multiple layers, create and assign macros, and control the lighting. There are even some custom functions for programs like Adobe Photoshop and Figma available on the Media tab of the key bindings page. You also get 2 advanced features that are more common on Hall effect keyboards rather than mechanical keyboards. There's an SOCD feature which allows you to set up 2 keys for last key priority. I tested this feature and it worked without any issues for me. On the A and D keys is how I set it up for gaming use, and it worked just fine as if it was a Hall effect keyboard. Now, the other feature is called Tap Dance. It allows you to select a single key and assign 3 functions to it, one for a quick tap, one for a double tap, and one if you hold it down. Now, it did work for me. However, I noticed that it introduced latency with the input of the simple tap function. This is probably something that NuPhy can improve with future updates. And to be clear, at the time of testing this out, the version of NuPhy IO that I was using was a beta version for the Air75 V3 that isn't public yet, but it might be by the time you're watching this video. Another built-in pro of NuPhy IO is the ease of firmware updates. With the Air75 V2, which used QMK-based firmware, you had to download the firmware file from NuPhy and then use the QMK Toolbox application to flash the firmware to the keyboard, which is a multi-step process. With the Air75 V3 and NuPhy IO, the web app will give you a pop-up prompt when a firmware update is available, and it's just a couple of simple clicks to run the update. And then the same thing applies to updating the 2.4 gigahertz receiver, just a couple clicks and it's done. It's much more in line with the expectations of customers who are not keyboard enthusiasts, and I'm thinking that was probably the point. Now, another pro here is that we now have knob options. This is another big change with the V3. You can keep the classic all keys layout or choose between a low profile knob and a high profile knob. Swapping them out just requires removing a single screw with the included screwdriver that holds a little module in place. While my test unit only came with the high profile knob and NuPhy originally planned to only include the high profile knob with the Air75 V3, thanks to customer feedback during the pre-order phase, NuPhy will now be including both the tall knob and the low profile knob in the retail final production units. So while I didn't receive the low profile knob to test out, you will be getting one if you pre-order. Both will be included. You can also customize the knob function in NuPhy IO, including traditional volume controls, mouse scrolling, and zoom. I do want to note that because this replaces the delete key, the default function when you first install it and switch the function of this key to be a knob is to actually be a delete key when it's pressed. It does the volume up and down when you scroll, but when you press it, it functions as a delete key. You can, of course, change that if you do what I did, which is just to relocate the delete key here. I never use the page up key, so I put the delete key here, which enabled me to then switch this to be a mute function. Now there's one little downside to the high profile knob specifically, but we will get to that in the cons. Overall, I think this is a very cool update to the design, and I love that it's optional, it's not required. Continuing with more pros, the switch options are all nice, and there is subjectivity with regard to the typing feel and sound, of course, but we have a linear option, a tactile option, and a silent option. I have tested all of the switch options because they are the same switches from the IQUNIX that came out earlier this year. They all perform well with minimal wobble, no spring ping, and a nice smooth feel. The silent option are some of the nicest silent switches I've used actually, and they're great for quiet environments like if you're bringing your keyboard to work. Now there is a little bit of a downside with these switches, but we'll cover that actually in the neutral category. The keycaps are also good quality. We have a similar style to the previous generation Air series in terms of the profile here. We have the NuPhy NSA low profile, but it has been slightly refined. They have a small amount of PBT texture to them, and they no longer include that trademark NuPhy color scheme with a different bright colored spacebar and enter key. It does come with a couple of colored accent keys on it, but there are plain white keys to replace those that come in the box. So you can have a purely white and silver look if you want it. And you can also swap out the included or installed Mac modifier keys for Windows modifier keys because those are in the box as well. Now I'm saying white and silver because that's the one I have, but of course the same things apply to the black color option. I do want to also mention the lighting here before we leave the pros. The Air series has also had some nice lighting, and while they've never come with shine-through keycaps, the V3 does have north-facing backlighting, so if you wanted to change these out for shine-through keycaps, they should illuminate most legends well. The accent lights on the sides of the top case are a little less in your face, I think, compared to the V2. They're now segmented rather than a solid bar. You can control the side light ambient functions separately from the main key area backlight as well, which is always nice because you can have one on or both on or neither one on. The Air75 V3 is also still portable. It is slightly heavier than the prior generation, but it's still perfectly lightweight enough to be portable, and it does still sit on top of a laptop keyboard if you want it to. I took it with me actually on a recent trip, and I had no issues using it sitting on top of my MacBook. One thing I will point out about travel though is that the tall knob option here does inhibit portability a little bit because it sticks out from the other keys. So if you don't have a case or cover for it that accommodates this knob, then this knob isn't the best option to have installed when you are traveling because of that. Now, I also have to acknowledge in the pros that NuPhy finally is releasing an ISO layout for the Air75 with version 3. The release date, I believe, is June 30th for that one, as far as when you'll be able to pre-order it. It is about 3 years overdue, but it is great to see that they're finally coming through with an ISO layout option. And the last thing I want to mention in the pros will take us into the neutral category, and it's the feel and the sound. From an objective standpoint, NuPhy definitely succeeded in further refining the sound of the Air75 with version 3. As you heard in the sound test, the original Air75 seems downright noisy and rather hollow, and kind of sloppy sounding compared to the new V3. And while the V2 was an improvement, it still does not sound as refined as other options on the market like the Lofree Flow or the MQ80 from IQUNIX. But now, with version 3, NuPhy has used a flexible, at least by low-profile keyboard standards, gasket mount structure here with extra foam in it so it sounds more controlled and less hollow and, well, a little bit more similar to the competition in terms of lacking any negative sounds. Whether you like the sound that you get from the Air75 V3 is, of course, subjective, so let's move into the neutral category where we discuss subjective things that you may think are good or bad or you just may not care. So wrapping up the conversation on the feel and sound, it is less firm feeling than both the Air75 original and the Air75 V2. It now has a little bit more flexibility, and it's more in line in terms of the typing feel with its main competitors in the low profile space. Another permanent resident of the neutral category is the physical design. As I said earlier, NuPhy took a step away from their previous more colorful and quirky design styles with version 3. It's kind of the polar opposite of the Kick75 in terms of the design choices that they made. I believe the Air75 V3 design is really intended to have mass appeal, which I think they delivered on. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier about the physical design is that we still have switches on the keyboard in the back to control the connection mode, which is either off, wired, or wireless, and a switch for Windows and Mac modes. All right, the last thing I want to mention in the neutral category is an additional consideration regarding the switches, as I alluded to earlier. Now, I counted the switch choices overall as a pro because in my testing and experience with them, they are all good quality options. But the thing that I want to point out that's more in the neutral space, because either you don't care about this or maybe you do care, is that the Gateron low profile 3.0 switches that are used here, they have the same pin positions as high profile switches. That means the Air75 V3 is not compatible with any of the switches that were and are still available for the prior Air75 generations. So for some of you, this will fall into the con category if you are hoping to use some switches that you already have in an Air75 V3. But for anyone who doesn't already have any of those prior switches, I don't really see this as a downside, because you do have options to choose from here. You're not just like stuck with one switch. All right, let's move on and talk about just a couple of cons for the Air75 V3 because it's not quite perfect. First, if you do prefer the taller knob here, there are two cons associated with that. The main one is that it is quite wobbly with this knob here. So more so than the low profile knob is going to be. Again, I don't have one, so I'm guessing, but there's just no way that the low profile knob is going to be this wobbly. It just doesn't feel very sturdy to me. And it doesn't feel like it's going to break under normal circumstances, but it doesn't feel like it would take too much extra leverage here to actually damage it. Now, the next thing is a small thing, but still to me worth mentioning. While NuPhy did some great work refining the sound and feel compared to the prior generation of the Air75, the stabilizers to me, they're still not best in class. And because of the increase in competition in the market of low profile mechanical keyboards in the last couple of years, to me, it's now kind of a downside to have just average stabilizers. And honestly, it's really just the spacebar in my unit. It's just a little bit of a less controlled sound than my other stabilized keys. The enter key, the backspace, the left shift. Again, not a deal breaker, not a huge deal. I was just, with V3, I was kind of hoping for like the holy grail of low profile stabilizers, and they didn't quite get there. The last con that I want to mention is that disassembly may damage the Air75 V3. Now, don't get me wrong, it's never been super simple to disassemble Air series keyboards from NuPhy. But in my opinion, you should be able to open a keyboard up without significant risk of damaging it. Some low-profile keyboards still utilize screws for assembly, like the IQUNIX MQ80, making it easier to do things like change the foam to adjust the sound, or even, at some point in the future, maybe you need to replace the battery. You want to be able to disassemble the keyboard without breaking it. Now, the Air75 is not marketed as an enthusiast keyboard that encourages you to open it up and tinker around with things. So you're not supposed to be doing that, but the plastic clip style assembly makes it much easier to break something if you do open it up, and that's not my favorite. All right, let's consider the Air75 V3 overall and the price. At $139 US, it is not a cheap keyboard, but it's also not expensive for the mechanical keyboard market. There's no official definition, of course, but competitors like the Lofree Flow and the MQ80 are in the $160, $170 range. So the combination that you're getting here of features and quality, I think are very good for the price, especially considering you have a couple of significant advantages over those competitors, namely the battery life and the option to have a knob. In fact, my opinion of the Air75 V3 is that it is so far the best low-profile mechanical keyboard of 2025, because NuPhy has managed to take what was great about prior versions and refine it to a point where it's a more mature feeling product, but now it offers battery life that far exceeds the other mechanical and customizable options on the market. Now, it's worth pointing out the MQ80 still has a little bit of a more premium look and feel to it overall because of the full aluminum case and bottom that it has with no plastic in the construction. It has that kind of dense, heavy material that you would find in a premium high-profile keyboard, but that does come at the expense of portability. But if you're looking for a little bit of everything combined into one, meaning the best battery life, portability, premium and stylish looks, and great typing feel and sound, the Air75 V3, it's it. All right, so that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the Air75 V3. Let me know if you pick one up for yourself and how you're liking it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech+Gear channel, and while you're here, check out one of these videos. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.